sexy guys do. Explore what's all in their minds. Thinking about a thing or two, about a thing or two, about a thing or two. Mansplaining is deciding you're gonna search for the truth. Mansplain me, baby. Mansplain. There can be no thinking that would be uncool.
Welcome to Mansplaining, a podcast about the interesting things you can discover if you just take the time to learn. My name is Joe. I'm your host for this week. And as always, I'm joined by my college friend, Mark. Together, we'll explore what's on our minds and hopefully figure out a thing or two about a thing or two. Mark, I'm going to draw a connection between our last topic and this topic. So last time we talked about lawns, green lawns, which is a really interesting question on your part. And today we're talking about expiration dates on household products. And I think both of those topics are something we take for granted, and perhaps we shouldn't. That's the connection I'm making. And to illustrate why maybe we shouldn't take expiration dates for granted, I just want to tell two quick anecdotes before we start. And one is, I may have told you I suffered a back injury recently, and it was really debilitating. And luckily, my primary care physician had prescribed some muscle relaxants for me about 18 months ago, prophylactically. And he basically said, use this if you have another incident with your back. So I went right to the medicine cabinet and noticed that my muscle relaxants said discard after 1 year on the label, and it was 18 months later. Mm-hmm. But I used them because I needed them, and they worked perfectly well. Yeah. That's anecdote number one. Anecdote two is that I'm sitting here with a glass of seltzer that I poured for myself, and that came from a clear plastic bottle on whose face is written the words, "Never use after October 2024, which was 9 months ago. So I think you can tell from my two stories that I don't pay much heed to expiration dates. Yeah, I think they're a crock of shit, quite frankly. And this is why I asked you this question. It was a two-part question for you, which is, are expiration dates for real? You know, do these products truly expire? And then my second question is, if they do truly expire, and I'm just wrong about this, is the expiration of all these products kind of an example of the phenomenon of planned obsolescence, where producers make things that they are planned to fall apart quickly so that you keep buying and buying more of them? So those are the two questions for you for this time, and I'm really interested and can't wait to hear your answer, whether my hunch is correct. So take it away, Mark.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. And when you asked me about this, the expiration dates of things like aspirin, toothpaste, plastic bottles, and KN95 masks, you sent me down a trail that led to a pretty fascinating example of how consumer perception, scientific reality, and economic incentives can all get tangled up to create this, what you could call a perfect storm of confusion. Your suspicion about planned obsolescence isn't entirely wrong. I'll tell you that now. But the truth involves three interconnected factors: genuine scientific concerns, consumer confusion, and, yes, some economic incentives. And we'll be going through each of these.
Okay, good.
The concept of product expiration date sits at the intersection of genuine scientific concern and legitimate business strategy, which makes it incredibly difficult to parse truth from marketing. You mentioned how ubiquitous these dates are, and they become so commonplace that we barely question their necessity or accuracy. But to understand whether these dates represent something real, or if they're no more than a clever manipulation tactic, we need to examine what's really happening behind the scenes. So let's start with your suspicion that self-interested corporations are setting expiration dates artificially early. Planned obsolescence is an economic strategy where products are intentionally designed with artificially limited useful lives or purposely frail designs. And the goal is straightforward: to reduce the time between repeat purchases and generate higher long-term sales.
Right.
This strategy works particularly well when producers have significant market share and can leverage consumer brand loyalty, exploiting an information asymmetry where the producer knows the design lifespan, but the consumer does not.
Yeah. And if I could just jump in there, the classic example from our childhood is cars. You must remember in the 70s when foreign cars, Toyotas, Volkswagens, lasted many years longer than the Chevy or the Ford or the Chrysler that a lot of Americans bought. And the story we always heard is because the American car makers made their cars to fall apart in 3 or 4 years, so you have to buy a new one. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's the story we were told.
Yeah, and you can imagine that that's only a feasible strategy in a context where there's limited to no viable competition, where like your scenario from the 70s where foreign cars are coming in and lasting longer might have been sort of a wake-up call for the American car industry, which had enjoyed decades of sort of an unrivaled position in the marketplace where consumers would buy whatever they produced.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Hegemony.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the economic incentives of this sort of thing would seem obvious. Think about your medicine cabinet right now. How many bottles of aspirin or tubes of toothpaste have you or consumers like you thrown away simply because they hit their printed date? The fundamental principle of planned obsolescence is stimulating sales by shortening the replacement cycle, and expiration dates could theoretically serve this purpose perfectly. This suspicion extends particularly to pharmaceuticals, where manufacturers' economic incentives to boost profits by specifying shorter shelf lives might be joined by an additional incentive to avoid liability by not allowing the drugs to come anywhere close to the date where they go bad. Some critics have also asserted that shelf life is not significantly studied during the drug development process, which could provide cover for expiration dates to be more conservative than scientifically necessary. But before we conclude this is all corporate manipulation, we need to talk about a crucial second factor: how confused we all are about what these dates actually mean. Because it turns out most of us are reading these labels completely wrong. A significant reason for the perception of artificially short dates is widespread consumer misunderstanding of what some of these labels actually mean. When you see a product label in the United States that gives best by or sell by dates, those are not expiration dates. They're product quality dates. Because in addition to economic incentives, product manufacturers also have brand incentives. For example, consider a product like milk. There's a date by which the product, if it's still in the supermarket or sitting in your refrigerator, should be presumed unsafe to consume. Drinking milk beyond that date could make you sick. But there's another date, which is quite a bit earlier, when the milk is likely to start tasting a little bit off. If you're a milk retailer, you want consumers to think your milk is delicious. The last thing you want is for someone to pour sour milk into their coffee, and after one disgusting sip of that brew, come to associate your brand with unpleasant milk-related experiences and be more likely to buy a different brand the next time they're at the store. The best by date doesn't say anything about product safety. It's simply the date after which the manufacturer thinks you're likely to have an experience of the product that's subpar enough that it might negatively influence customer perceptions of their brand.
Okay, fair point, and I appreciate you bringing that up because I am willing to say that I may be misunderstanding that concept. But I want to just bring up two things. Number one, even I, an expiration date rebel that I am, do not question expiration dates on food because foods are obviously perishable. So I think they need to be put aside. And it's more, my beef is more with aspirin and toothpaste than it is with food. But secondly, this misunderstanding you helpfully bring up, it benefits the producers for the consumer to be misunderstanding this. So, and I suspect the producer is taking no steps to educate the consumer about this because it obviously benefits them for people to keep throwing away their aspirin long before it really needs to be thrown away.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, To an extent, but I would point out that there's a delicate balance that producers would want to do. That if they set that expiration date, that use by date too soon, then that could again negatively influence their brand perception, where people start to think, "Oh my God, I spent so much money on this milk or this butter or this bread, whatever it is, it goes bad so fast." Like, you really don't want to push the date too far where you create a lasting negative perception that can be very difficult to turn back around again. So yes, I would imagine they're tempted,
right?
But if they're smart, they would not want to push that too far.
Okay.
In the European Union, food date labeling is standardized, and regulations mandate two primary types of dates: use by and best before. A use by date relates to food safety and is applied to highly perishable foods such as fresh meat, fish, and dairy. Foods with this label should not be consumed after the specified date, even if they appear or smell fine, due to the potential that harmful bacteria have had a chance to contaminate the food.
Right.
A best before date, on the other hand, focuses on food quality and is typically found on longer lasting items such as pasta, rice, or canned goods. American labeling, on the other hand, is more loosely regulated, as has been a common recurring theme on this podcast, is that things in America are looser than they are in the EU.
Yes.
Expiration date labeling here is mandatory, but use by and sell by date labeling is voluntary and inconsistently applied. And the system is ambiguous enough that most American consumers incorrectly interpret quality-based labels like best by or sell by as indicators of safety, which leads to substantial amounts of usable products being discarded prematurely. Consumer behavioral studies show that fear of adverse effects and general risk sensitivity heavily influence decisions to discard products. Individuals often adopt a better safe than sorry mentality. A 2025 survey found that 88% of consumers discard products based on date labels, even when many items remain safe and effective to use. This confusion leads U.S. consumers to discard approximately 3 billion pounds of food, valued at $7 billion annually, translating to an average annual cost of roughly $1,300 per household in wasted products.
Yeah.
Only about 53% of consumers can correctly identify the meanings of various date labels.
Thank goodness there are now some companies that are rescuing leftover cuisine in the time it has remaining, and that's become quite a lifeline for a lot of impoverished people, is my understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
But your larger point about how expiration dates sow doubt, there is that old expression, when in doubt, throw it out, right? We all heard that as kids. And I think that's the foremost advertisement for the regime of planned obsolescence,
Right. Yeah.
If you instill that idea in everybody's head, then you're going to get all this stuff that's not really bad yet thrown out.
Yeah. And I'm very, very stubborn about not wanting to throw food out because I hate the waste of it.
Yeah.
And I'll share with you, there was this moment early in my relationship with Sonia where she was staying at my apartment. And while I was at work, the power went out for about 3 hours. And when I came home, the refrigerator was completely empty. She had thrown out every single item in the refrigerator, including some cheese I had bought the day before and was still in the wrapper. That was, we
and
disagreed.
You stayed with her. Good man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That might have ended my relationship. Yeah.
So the toothpaste and aspirin examples that you brought up when you first posed this question fall into this quality safety divide.
Yeah.
For the vast majority of products, dates like best if used by are indicators of subjective qualities such as effectiveness, taste, texture, and freshness, not safety. So where do quality dates come from? Many are influenced by consumer preference testing, where the use-by date is set based on when a significant percentage of consumers no longer liked the performance or quality. This effectively shortens the product's usable life for consumers, prioritizing peak performance, aligning with what experts call, quote, obsolescence of desirability, unquote. Best if used by dates are designed to ensure consumers experience the product at peak quality, which for manufacturers is crucial for maintaining consumer trust and brand reputation. However, while this may suggest that expiration dates are largely a function of marketing, the process of determining a product's shelf life can be quite rigorous. Let's say you're a manufacturer of a consumer product, and you want to determine how long it's safe to consume. So how do you actually determine these dates? Let's say you're making toothpaste. You need to test what happens to your product over time. Will bacteria grow in it? Will the fluoride lose its effectiveness? Will the toothpaste ingredients separate or change texture? Will the tube itself start to break down? Manufacturers run tests that, in the course of a few weeks, attempt to simulate months or years of storage, exposing products to heat, humidity, and light to see what fails first. Environmental factors like temperature, humidity, and light exposure, along with the characteristics of the product, such as composition, pH, and packaging methods, are all crucial variables. The determination of shelf life is a highly customized process, meticulously tailored to the specific product, its unique ingredients, preparation methods, intended storage conditions, and packaging. This intricate interplay makes a one-size-fits-all approach impractical, especially when you take into account the many different supply chains by which a product might make its way from the factory to your local store. So let's take a bottle of aspirin in your bathroom. The FDA doesn't just let manufacturers guess at expiration dates. They require companies to prove their aspirin will still relieve your headache 2 years from now, stored in a typical medicine cabinet. They test the pills at different temperatures and humidity levels, measuring exactly how the active ingredients break down. Expired medications might have reduced potency, or they might degrade into potentially harmful compounds. FDA inspections verify that dates are scientifically sound, and manufacturers face severe penalties for unsupported claims. And then your KN95 mask represents a completely different category. Medical devices have highly regulated shelf lives due to their critical role in safety and are governed by international ISO standards. Expired protective equipment can pose significant risks, as the materials may degrade in ways that compromise their protective capabilities. And even a plastic bottle has scientific justification for its dating. Plastics can undergo chemical changes over time, potentially affecting both the container's integrity as well as its contents. Ultraviolet light exposure, temperature fluctuations, and chemical migration can all have an effect on the bottle's performance and your safety in its use. And then there's the question of how the product will be stored once it's in your home, whether you put that bottle of aspirin in a medicine cabinet or leave it on a windowsill where it might be exposed to temperature fluctuations and sunlight for hours every day. Manufacturers tend to set dates conservatively to account for the wide variability in storage conditions that consumers might expose products to after they're purchased. This represents a more or less necessary risk mitigation strategy to ensure safety and efficacy for the broadest possible consumer base rather than a deliberate act of planned obsolescence. Manufacturers face significant legal and reputational risks from product recalls, adverse events, or consumer complaints about poor performance. And of course, we are a society that loves its litigation. So if you take a dose of NyQuil and you have a bad experience of that, and then go on social media to complain about it, or you bring a suit against the company, your actions represent risk to that company, both its earnings and its reputation, whether or not the company was at fault in that. So it does tend to push companies in the direction of being more conservative than they need to be, kind of echoing that earlier principle of better safe than sorry.
Attention mansplaining listeners. If you want to engage with Mark and me, you have some options. One is to go to our Facebook page, Mansplaining the Podcast, where you can leave a comment or question, check our sources, suggest topics for future episodes, or just like us, because who doesn't want to be liked? You can also reach us through whatever app you use to listen to this podcast by giving us a 5-star rating or writing a review of your favorite episode. Or you can call and leave us a message on our dedicated voicemail box, which is 206-486-4074. And did you know that you can now listen to full episodes of Mansplaining on YouTube and check out our podcast music on Spotify? Yep, it's true. Just type Mansplaining Podcast into the search bar on either platform and you'll find us. It's lonely in podcast land, and we welcome and appreciate any feedback you might want to share. Act now and we'll throw in a set of Ginsu knives. Not really. Okay, you've put a lot on the table here. And again, I appreciate all these facts you're hitting me with. And I'm happy, frankly, to hear that there's some kind of rigorous scientific product testing, as well as the consumer testing you mentioned. I wasn't sure if that was happening. But when we're talking about like the plastic soda bottle, right? If plastic naturally degrades over time from exposure to heat or light or cold, as you just said, then why put things that never expire, like water, in plastic? Are they doing that because it's cheaper?
Yes.
Maybe they are, but given the environmental cost, is it truly cheaper to put water in plastic? I guess it's a simple answer. They do it because it's cheaper, but it's really a stupid thing to do, given that you could put it in glass, and I bet it will last for years, not months.
Sure. Yeah, it's cheaper not only to produce, but also to ship, because plastic is a lot lighter weight than glass. So you put that water in a glass bottle, it's quite a bit heavier, and in aggregate, that adds significantly to your shipping costs. I can only presume that in the water bottling company, there's some calculation that says how long water can be presumed to be safe within a plastic bottle, because the plastic does leach into the water over time. And then they run that against their calculations of how long water bottles sit on shelves before they're sold and then sit at home before they're consumed. And they figure, okay, we're safe as long as these assumptions hold true. The assumption within consumer water that you can purchase is that that water should be consumed quickly or relatively quickly in order for the plastic leaching not to be a threat.
Okay, well, I guess when I'm dead, they run the autopsy, they're going to find a lot of microplastics in me because I'm a big SodaStream guy. I love my seltzer, and using the same plastic bottles over and over and over again.
Right, yeah. Killed by seltzer is what they'll put on your headstone. In short, setting expiration dates artificially short is more likely to represent a defensive risk management strategy designed to avoid costly legal battles and reputational damage rather than an offensive strategy to boost sales.
On the subject of being conservative on expiration dates as a defensive strategy, that makes total sense to me logically. But before this episode, I looked at the common recommendations for some household products, and I want to throw a couple at you with regard to this defensive strategy. Like, did you know, Mark, that pillows are supposed to be thrown away after a year and a half? That the bath mat you use for your shower is supposed to be thrown away after 2 years? You know, it just seems to me some of these recommendations just seem like arbitrary and ridiculous.
Sure.
And if that's a defensive strategy, boy, it's just crazy to think that I have to throw my favorite pillow. I've probably had it for 15 years.
Right.
I have to throw that away after 18 months. It just seems crazy to me. It doesn't fit in this logical system you're talking about right now.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts about pillows and bath mats in particular are they're both environments where moisture can get trapped and bacteria can grow. And yeah, that's not anything I think about. I will keep a pillow for my entire life until the down in the pillow escapes entirely. I'll keep using that thing. So I'm not a pillow discarder.
That's right.
But I imagine every now and then my wife will read something that reminds her that bacteria can grow inside pillows, and then you're breathing it in for 8 hours every night. And that is potentially a risk, but obviously it's not a serious risk because I haven't died yet. And it's not a widespread risk because it hasn't been tied to any epidemic. But on some level, a company might be thinking, A, we'd like people to buy more pillows, and B, if they hold on to the pillows too long, maybe someone gets sick from our pillows, and then that blows back on us. So therefore, it's in our interest to encourage a little bit of pillow in, pillow out.
Right.
So all told, the reality of expiration dates represents something a bit more subtle than outright deception, but it's also more problematic than pure science. You asked about planned obsolescence, but direct, widespread evidence of manufacturers intentionally designing expiration dates to be artificially short solely to increase sales is limited and largely anecdotal. But that being said, confusion surrounding the meaning of dates on the labels, added to the collective psychological response to the perception of risk, creates a form of psychological obsolescence for products. The item is not functionally degraded or unsafe, but is perceived as unusable or risky by the consumer due to the date label, leading to premature disposal. And this outcome not only mirrors planned obsolescence, it leads to massive waste, economic inefficiency, and environmental burden. So your household items don't typically transform from good to bad overnight on their expiration dates. Your toothpaste will likely clean your teeth effectively for months or even years past its printed date, and your aspirin will probably retain most of its potency well beyond its expiration. However, to call this a lie or a ruse would oversimplify the complexity of the system. The truth is that expiration dates represent a convergence of legitimate scientific concerns, regulatory requirements, legal protections, and economic incentives. Rather than being examples of classic planned obsolescence, products intentionally designed to fail, they are part of a system that has evolved to prioritize caution and risk management in ways that often result in premature disposal. Addressing the issue and changing it for the better would require a multi-pronged approach. Standardizing date labels with clear distinctions between quality and safety indicators, consumer education campaigns to clarify the meanings of those labels, and investment in technological innovations like smart packaging that can provide real-time condition indicators. So, you weren't wrong to question the necessity of replacing perfectly functional products, but the challenge lies not in exposing a conspiracy, but in reforming a system that evolved to be overly conservative in ways that don't serve consumers or the environment. On a practical level, in the case of Best By dates on things like toothpaste, soap, and most over-the-counter medications, you're probably fine using them well past the date. Use by dates on anything that can spoil or lose critical safety functions should be taken more seriously. The key is taking into consideration which product category you're dealing with. I have a dream of a day when products will come with clear labeling that distinguishes between this might taste a little bad and this might actually be dangerous.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'll probably keep using products well past their expiration date because I hate the thought of throwing away something that's so perfectly fine. And my wife will probably keep throwing them away because she'd rather throw something away a little early than risk getting sick from it. Maybe someday my dream will come true for all of us.
Yeah, I think I share your dream, and I really like the helpful middle ground you sketch out at the end there, where if it's a product whose safety is very important to your health, like whose reliability, I should say, is important to your health, like the COVID mask, you should probably be more questioning about its expiration date and more scrupulous about getting rid of it. Whereas if it's something innocuous like toothpaste or aspirin, you can keep using it till the container is empty.
Right. Yeah. With aspirin, you do ingest it, which is a source of concern, but you tend to take it in very small doses, which ameliorates that concern.
Yeah.
So any medication where you're taking it on a daily basis and somehow those pills have gone past their expiration date, that would be much more cause for concern. And you should probably exercise more caution in that respect.
And I'm also glad you brought up the issue of massive waste and the environmental factors, because I was going to bring that up if you didn't. And, for those of our listeners who think I'm just dead wrong on this and are much more cautious than I am, I have this question for you. If we followed all these recommendations on the labels scrupulously, there'd be so much more stuff in landfills right now. And doesn't that also matter? I mean, I think you believe it does matter, Mark, but I want everybody else to think about it.
Yeah, I certainly think it matters. I'm not sure what it is about my upbringing, but I grew up to really hate waste. Waste of food in particular, but waste in general. And so I've always had my back up against expiration dates that feel like they're, like you say, artificially short. And I feel good about getting additional use out of stuff that someone else might have thrown away. And yeah, we might be better served a little bit as a society, at least the environment might be better served if we do make the attempt to get full value out of products, to get that full life out of the product,
Yes.
instead of discarding it at the first opportunity.
Yes. And, I guess the last thing I want to say on this topic is lest people misconceive of me as some crazy conspiracy theorist, I just want to reiterate something I said earlier, which is I'm not completely against expiration dates. Some expiration dates make perfect common sense, like anything regarding food perishability, right? I put that in a completely separate category. But also even for inanimate objects, non-living objects, we're supposed to test our smoke alarm every 6 months and replace the battery, even if it still shows signs of working. That makes perfect sense to me. Your life is at stake if the battery fails. Replace it. And if the battery really didn't need to be replaced, well, that's something you chalk up to caution, right? That completely makes sense to me. Or I also think of other household items like, the toothbrush, right? The bristles eventually get soft and you use the toothbrush over and over again. So it makes sense to dispose of your toothbrush or to dispose of your razor blade, right? Because it gets dull and that's when you can get cut, when it's dull. So getting rid of that after a certain period of time, or for the manufacturer to say it's effective until a certain period of time, I have no argument with that. But the toothpaste, the razor itself, outside of the blades, the actual razor itself, it just seems silly to me and just wrong to throw that away before it's actually falling apart in your hands, So I guess I am on your side of this about not getting rid of things too early. Just wondering your reaction to that.
No, we're totally on the same page here. I don't see any reason why the razor itself would expire. I think if there's one takeaway from this episode, it's to think about what the labels actually mean and apply them mindfully. And just do not be knee-jerk. Understand if it's a quality label, then it doesn't mean that that's a necessary use-by label. And think again about whether or not this product relates to safety, then maybe caution is warranted. And if it doesn't, then think that maybe you're doing a little bit of good for the environment by not throwing it away at the first opportunity.
Yeah.
So if we can all throw away a little bit less, then that would be a good thing. And being more mindful about expiration dates can help serve that.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. And to just put a bow on this, bring it back to the similarity with the lawns episode, I think there's a parallel there as well. We just need to be more mindful about what we're doing when we grow big green lawns and what the implications of that are for use of water, use of resources, the effect on the environment. And similarly here, as you just said, if we're just a little bit more mindful about expiration dates and don't accept them unblinkingly, but at the same time, take them seriously, especially when, as you said, it's about safety and not quality. All right. Well, thanks. You certainly answered my question, and I guess I'm not entirely wrong, but my knee-jerk suspicions, there's certainly a lot more nuance to this subject than I thought there was, and I appreciate you clarifying it for me.
I'm always happy to complicate questions for you, Joe.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, you've got a question for me, I trust, so fire away.
Yes, and I'm glad that just a little while ago you referred to our usage of water, because my question relates to that, which is I've been hearing for a number of years scattered reports that the water table is dropping. And I've heard that this is related to such things as California wildfires. And on some level, that seems like an existential risk. If we run out of potable water, then we can't irrigate our crops, we can't grow food, people will die. So my question for you, how severe of a problem is this? Like, is this an existential risk? And if so, within what time frame?
Okay, yeah. Big issue in the news. in recent years, certainly out west, but I think the fate of the Colorado River and how its water is divided between all those western and southwestern states, that's a big issue. So yeah, this will be an interesting one, and I will get back to you with hopefully a answer that makes sense in a few weeks.
Okay, I look forward to it.
So you heard it, folks. Mark has given me the question for next time, and I will come back in a few weeks and we'll tape another episode of Mansplaining where I'll explain that question to Mark and our listeners. But until then, that was Mark and I'm Joe, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you then.
Is possible the reason I'm pooped out and tired is that the package of pep pills I'm popping expired? Can it be this bad breath with which I've been mired afflicts me because my toothpaste expired? You mean the unrelenting pain in my pate is cause my aspirin exceeds its use by date? It's exceedingly easy to see how expiration dates are gonna be the death of me. So my girlfriend got pregnant every time, cause the condoms I used were past their prime, and that topical gel that I used for the claps had no benefit cause it already lapsed, and the seltzer I kept in the fridge to stay cold poisoned me because the plastic's too old. It's exceedingly easy to see how expiration dates are gonna be the death of me. If you want to avoid this fate, it's really not tough. Just throw away everything that's not up to snuff. Buy new things and throw them away soon enough. And thank the fine sellers of all your new stuff. I don't mean to be truculent, rude or unruly, but what about the expiration date on yours truly? Is there a best by date for mice and a sense? Is my downfall a matter of planned obsolescence? There will come a time when I'm enfeebled, disabled. Should human vitality like aspirin be labeled? It's exceedingly easy to see how expiration dates are gonna be the death of me. Those expiration dates, they're gonna be the death of me.
Mansplaining is brought to you by Joe and Mark and nobody else. Music composed and performed by the Mansplaining House Band. Thank you for spending your time with us, and we'll see you next time.